Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The wall clock ticked steadily, the minute hand creeping toward 12. The street outside was deserted, lit only by a few scattered yellow lamps casting their glow on the damp sidewalks after the evening rain. Inside the small cafe, the warm golden light spilled across wooden tables, the aroma of roasted coffee mingling with the faint scent of cinnamon from a candle on the counter. Mira yawned, her hands moving quickly as she stacked chairs and collected the cups customers had left behind. It had been a long day. Regulars, walk-ins, and even a group of students chatting away until late. For months now, she had been running the cafe alone, working while juggling bank payments. Sometimes I really do feel like a superwoman, Mira muttered with a tired smile as she wiped a coffee stain off a table. All right, time to close, she mumbled, untying her apron, about to switch off the lights when knock. The sudden sound startled her. It was firm but not too loud. Who on earth would knock on a cafe door at midnight? She turned. Outside the glass stood a tall man in a black suit, his tie slightly askew, as if he had just finished a long day of meetings. His face, handsome in a stern way, was illuminated by the streetlight. His eyes, though, carried a hint of weariness and loneliness. He gestured, lips forming the words, "Just one cup of coffee, please." Mira frowned. Normally, she never reopened after closing, but the way he knocked, patient yet pleading, made her hesitate. Maybe he's drunk or got left behind, she guessed, then chuckled at her own imagination. She cracked the door open. "Sorry, the cafe is closed." The man inclined his head slightly, his voice low and husky yet polite. "I know, but just one last cup of coffee before this day ends." Mira blinked. The line sounded both dramatic and pitiful. She meant to refuse, but the way his eyes lingered inside the cafe, like a child craving warmth, softened her heart. She crossed her arms. "Do you even know what time it is? Midnight?" His reply was short, his lips curving faintly. "The perfect time for coffee." Mira laughed, planning to stay up until morning. The man shrugged. "I hardly sleep anyway. One cup at this hour won't make a difference." The calmness mixed with quiet bitterness in his voice made Mira uneasy. Finally, she sighed, pushing the door wider. "All right, come in, but just one cup." He nodded gently and stepped inside. His stride was steady, not staggering clearly, not a troublesome drunk. He chose a table near the counter, loosened his tie, and exhaled as though releasing a mountain of pressure. While Mira prepared the coffee, he looked around. Bare red brick walls, a few small paintings, an old bookshelf with novels. The place was tiny but warm. "Your cafe is lovely," he said unexpectedly. "Small but comfortable." Grinding the beans, Mira answered, "Thanks. I opened it because of my mother's dream." "And now, what's your dream?" Her hands froze for a moment. She eyed him suspiciously. "Are you a reporter or something?" He chuckled, a fleeting but bright smile. "No, just someone who needs coffee and a conversation." Mira placed the steaming cup in front of him. The rich aroma of Arabica filled the air. He lifted it, inhaled deeply, then took a small sip, his eyes closed as if savoring peace. "Delicious," he murmured. "Perhaps the most genuine cup of coffee I've had in years." "Wow, you sound like you're straight out of a romance movie." Mira laughed. "Careful, or I'll start charging extra for midnight philosophy." He looked up, his gaze steady, his voice deep and warm. "If you did, I'd pay." For some reason, Mira's heart skipped. She hid it by narrowing her eyes playfully. "I'm starting to think you're eccentric." "Maybe." He shrugged, eyes glinting. "But even eccentrics need coffee." In that moment, the little cafe felt like its own world. A young woman clinging to her modest dream, a successful man worn out, seeking a fragment of peace, and one midnight coffee unexpectedly connecting two souls who seemed like strangers. The silence was so deep that Mira could hear every drip of water from the espresso machine. Late at night was always like this. Every sound sharper, clearer than usual. She opened the jar of Arabica beans, the rich aroma filling the air, carrying with it a hint of pleasant bitterness. She could almost taste just from the scent. Elias sat at the table near the counter, elbows resting on the surface, his head tilted as he watched her. His gaze wasn't intrusive. It was the look of someone trying to hold on to a fleeting, peaceful moment. "Do you work this late every night?" he asked, his low voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "Well, if there aren't customers. I close early, but tonight." Mira glanced at him. "It seems someone changed the schedule." Elias chuckled softly, his tone carrying a hint of self-mockery. "So, I'm the reason you haven't gone home yet." "Exactly." Mira nodded, still measuring the beans. "But I suppose it's a nice change. I rarely get high-class customers at midnight." He raised his brows. "So, you recognize me?" "Well," Mira shrugged, hard not to. "The papers occasionally run your picture with lines like, 'The cold CEO of Sterling Enterprises takes over another company.'" Elias leaned back, his smile sounding more like a sigh. "Honestly, I just wanted a cup of coffee. I didn't mean to bring the CEO title into this little cafe. Too bad your suit gave you away," Mira teased, her eyes glinting with mischief. He nodded, then looked at her with a playful expression. "I could buy this entire cafe, but I doubt I could buy your smile." The line, both serious and joking, caught Mira off guard before she burst out laughing. She put one hand on her hip, firing back. "Try naming your price. Who knows? Maybe I'll sell the cafe and throw in a limited edition smile." "I'm afraid it's priceless," Elias replied, his eyes briefly lighting up, no longer carrying the weariness she had seen at the door. The air in the cafe felt lighter, easier to breathe. Mira worked with a small laugh. "You're exactly the kind of person who makes others want to cover their ears and keep listening at the same time. Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Depends on my mood." She shrugged, handing him a spoon. "Here, your midnight coffee. Strong, little sugar, perfect for insomniacs." Elias accepted the cup, lifting it as though it were something precious. He inhaled deeply, then took his first sip. The bitterness spread across his tongue, hot and sharp, yet strangely soothing. "It's wonderful," he murmured. "It's more than coffee. It feels like a way to end the day." Mira pulled out a chair, sat across from him, and rested her chin on her hand. "The last cup of coffee before laying down the burdens of the day, huh? Sounds philosophical." "Yes." He placed the cup back on the table, spinning it slowly. "My days usually end with reports, unread emails, or urgent calls. Rarely with a moment like this." Mira frowned. "Are you trying to advertise your job? If so, congratulations. You've convinced me never to apply to Sterling Enterprises." Elias burst out laughing, not loud, but genuine and rare. He shook his head. "I wouldn't dare invite you. I think you'd drive the entire office insane." "Exactly." She laughed, lifting her mug of tea. "I'd rather stay here. Small cafe, few people, but every cup of coffee I make has its own soul." Elias fell silent, his gaze meeting hers. There was something genuine in her words that surprised him. Between tense meetings and cold contracts, he had forgotten what it felt like to do something purely for joy, not for profit. "You seem happy with this work," he said. "Happy might be a stretch," Mira replied with a faint smile, "but at least every night I know I've lived a decent day." Elias leaned on the table, staring at his coffee. "I can't remember the last time I thought that way." "Then drink." Mira nudged the cup closer to him. "If you can't remember, let the coffee do it for you." He looked at her, the depths of his eyes catching the light. For a moment, both sat in silence. Outside, the wind nudged the signboard, making it creak like a familiar tune. "Mira." Elias hesitated as if her name had just carved itself clearly into his memory. "If I came back tomorrow night, would you make me another last cup of coffee?" She tilted her head, squinting at him with a half-playful, half-serious look. "Aren't you afraid of getting addicted?" "Maybe." His lips curved slightly. "But sometimes being addicted to something good isn't so bad." Mira laughed, rising to collect the washed cups. "Fine, but next time come earlier. I don't want to be sued for keeping a CEO up until midnight." "You don't realize," Elias said quietly, "this coffee might be the only thing that makes me forget the mountain of pressure out there." Mira froze for a heartbeat, her pulse quickening. She wasn't used to sudden confessions like that, but she masked it with a small smile and a teasing tone. "Then finish it before it gets cold. I need sleep, if I'm going to survive your midnight philosophy tomorrow." Elias raised a brow, but obediently did as she said. He drank slowly, as if savoring every second, and across the table, Mira realized tonight wasn't just about one last cup of coffee. It felt like a beginning. The following night, Just as Mira was locking the cash register and checking the fireplace, the familiar sound of knocking echoed again. Knock, knock, knock. She looked up, sighed, but couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. Outside stood the same tall figure in a dark suit, his tie crooked again, his face weary. Yet his eyes carrying a trace of anticipation. Mira walked over and opened the door, one hand on her hip. "Hey, are you planning to turn my cafe into your midnight branch office?" Elias shrugged, the corner of his mouth lifting. "I'm only looking for a place that serves the perfect last cup of coffee." She laughed, pushing the door open wider. "Come in, night owl customer." "Night owl customer?" he repeated with a small chuckle. That title actually fits. And so, from then on, Elias became her special guest, appearing at almost exactly midnight every night. Never a minute off. Some nights he even arrived a few minutes early, waiting outside, eyes on his watch, until the second hand hit 12 before knocking. "You obsessed with clocks or something?" Mira teased, placing a hot cup of coffee in front of him. "No," he replied, taking a sip, his voice mock serious. "I just respect tradition. The last cup of coffee only feels right at midnight." Mira shook her head, quietly smiling. Each night he came, the cafe felt less empty, and between the ticking of the clock, their conversation slowly grew. One night, Elias arrived later than usual, his tie disheveled, sweat beading on his forehead. He sank into the chair, exhaling as though he'd just run a marathon. "Meetings until now?" Mira asked, pouring him coffee. "Yeah." He rubbed his temples. "Numbers, projects, shareholders, a whole day of listening to everyone else's voices, but never my own." His words made Mira pause. Beneath that composed exterior, he was just another exhausted man, caught in the relentless grind of work. She slid a small cookie in front of him. "Eat. Sugar helps with stress." Elias glanced at the cookie, then at her. "I can't remember the last time someone gave me something without a contract attached." "Well, consider yourself lucky tonight," Mira replied lightly. The warmth shone in her eyes. He smiled, an honest smile, not the polite one he wore in public. In the nights that followed, their conversation stretched longer. Elias would share snippets from work, carefully stripped of secrets, leaving only the comic absurdities. A CFO dozing off mid-presentation, an employee hitting send all on an email, or the absurdity of being stalked by paparazzi even in the parking garage. Mira countered with stories from her everyday world. The neighborhood girl who always begged for sweets, the retired man who ordered a single cup of tea but lingered for hours reading the paper, or the time she accidentally swapped salt for sugar and left her customer laughing until tears. "You know," Mira said, resting her chin on her hand, "once I put salt in someone's cappuccino by mistake. They took one sip, and their face puckered like they'd bitten into a lemon." Elias burst out laughing, a real, full laugh that stunned Mira for a moment. She had never seen him laugh so freely. The stern lines of his face seemed to melt away, making him look years younger, his eyes lit with life, stripped of fatigue. "Oh my God," he laughed, covering his face with one hand. "I can't remember the last time I laughed like this." "Really?" Mira blinked, then feigned seriousness. "Well, then you owe me an entertainment fee." Laughing that loud shakes the cafe floor. He shook his head, looking at her with something different in his eyes. "Maybe I wouldn't mind paying that fee for the rest of my life." The words caught her off guard, and she quickly changed the subject. "Drink up before it gets cold." And so, the night owl customer and the cafe owner became unlikely companions of the silent city nights. Elias discovered he no longer dreaded the midnight hour. Instead of sitting alone in a cold office, he found himself waiting for the knock on the cafe door, craving Mira's simple, heartwarming stories. And Mira, though her lips often teased him, felt her heart warm each time she saw his figure outside the glass. His presence made the night shorter, the loneliness lighter. Sometimes the smallest surprises gave birth to something new, and sometimes just one last cup of coffee was enough to bring two worlds closer together. That afternoon, the rain drizzled steadily, the air turning crisp. Mira's cafe was unusually crowded. A group of students hunched over laptops, members of a book club debating animatedly, and two tourists curious about the salt coffee they had read about online. Mira dashed back and forth between the counter and the tables, tray in hand, smile on her lips, her mind tallying how much milk and how many cookies she had left. At 11, the little bell above the glass door chimed. Elias had arrived early. He stood under an umbrella, his dark suit speckled with raindrops. Seeing Mira so busy, he paused a moment before stepping inside, folding his umbrella neatly. "I'm a little early," he said, his eyes sweeping over the cluttered counter, his smile gentle. "Looks like a battlefield." "Don't tease," Mira exhaled, wiping down the machine, but smiling nonetheless. "It's unexpectedly packed tonight. Just wait a bit." Night owl customer. Elias glanced around and saw her juggling 3 milk pitchers, pressing the grinder with her other hand, and clutching a tray between her knees to keep it from falling. He shrugged off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and headed behind the counter. "What can I help with?" Mira jumped. "Hey, behind the counter is my territory. Just offering," he said with a grin. "If you need someone to wipe tables, wash cups, or do something very ordinary, I'm in. I want one day to feel ordinary." She was about to make a joke, but his earnest gaze stopped her. Instead, Mira pulled open a drawer and took out a cream-colored apron printed with a winking cat. "All right, you picked the right day. Put this on." Elias laughed at the sight. "A new logo for Sterling Enterprises." "Yeah, Cold Meow Enterprises." Mira shot back with a straight face. "Turn around. I'll tie it for you." The straps were short, so she had to stand close. The faint scent of mint from his shirt mixed with the warm aroma of coffee made the moment hard to define. Mira fumbled for a beat, tied the knot, and stepped back. "Done. Our temp worker is fully suited up. Do I get a rainy day allowance?" he teased. "Yes. 1 free cookie if you finish your shift. Now get to work, rookie." Mira assigned tasks like a commander. "Table 3 needs wiping. Go in circles. No streaks. Table 5 needs new water. Dirty cups in the left sink. And remember, smile at customers even while washing dishes." "Yes, boss." Elias raised the rag like a soldier. Sen. Operation start. The sight of $1 million CEO wiping tables in a cat apron nearly made Mira laugh out loud. He worked carefully, though his movements were stiff, leaving streaks behind. She followed, pointing, gentle, like drawing small circles, then widen gradually. "See? Lower your hand a little." Elias tried again. This time, better. "So, there really is a technique to this. I thought wiping a table was just wiping." "Nothing is just anything," Mira said with a mock sigh, though her eyes sparkled. "Do it well. And it shows." He nodded, as if he had learned a vital lesson. Moving on to carrying a tray, Elias managed steadily until he turned and nearly clipped a chair. The drinks wobbled, latte foam sloshing. Mira lunged to steady a cup, her heart skipping. "Heavens, were you trying to give the cafe a milk bath?" "Sorry, my office reflexes are too slow. At work, the only tray I carry is a slide deck. Here, a slip costs a latte, not a PowerPoint." Mira laughed until she bent over. "Go. I'll carry it. You? Dish duty." At the sink, Elias put on a pair of gloves. Mira instructed, "Warm water, not too hot, not too cold. A little soap. Scrub the rim carefully. Rinse under running water. Place upside down on the rack. And don't stack too high." "Got it?" he repeated, memorizing each step. Then crash. A cup slipped from his hand and split in 2. Elias froze, wincing like a schoolboy who had spilled ink. "I'm sorry. I'll pay for it." Mira bent down to pick up the pieces, her voice light. "It's fine. Broken cup by another. What matters is if you're tired. Are you okay?" Elias looked at her, then exhaled. "I am. Oddly enough, I feel lighter than ashamed." "Good. We don't measure broken cup KPIs here," she teased, winking, "but we do track customer smiles." He chuckled and resumed, this time slower, steadier. The clinking of cups and the ripple of water sounded cheerful. From the counter, Mira watched him, not as the polished man in boardrooms, but as someone suddenly approachable in a cat apron. "I want to try making." Elias glanced toward the espresso machine. "A latte? Is that allowed?" "Of course," Mira said, half joking, as she prepped the milk pitcher. "But if you spray milk on the ceiling, you clean it up." She guided him through, purging the wand, gauging the temperature, and creating fine foam. Elias focused so intently he frowned, steam hissing white. He tilted too far, and the milk nearly overflowed. Mira grabbed his wrist quickly, steadying him gently. Listen to the sound. When it lowers, the foam's right. Her hand brushed his warm. They stood close, both watching the white milk swirl into the dark espresso. Elias poured, trying for a heart. The result looked like a tadpole. Mira bit her lip to keep from laughing, then gave him a thumbs up. Not bad for a first try. See the tadpole swimming toward the heart. Thanks, art instructor, he chuckled, his eyes crinkling. Let me retake the exam tomorrow. Tomorrow and many tomorrows. The words slipped out naturally, making them both pause. Mira turned away quickly, setting the cup on a tray. The comedy escalated when a curly-haired student snapped a photo. Click, he whispered to his friend. Hey, isn't that Elias Sterling? The billionaire CEO washing dishes in a tiny cafe. Mira froze instinctively, glancing at Elias, afraid he'd be annoyed. But he only tilted his head, smiling calmly as he kept wiping the table. It's fine, he murmured as she approached. It's been a long time since I was in a place where people treated me like anyone else. That photo is ordinary, too. Moments later, Mira's phone buzzed. A message from her friend. Hey, did you hire an actor to play a CEO? The whole city is sharing pics of him in a cat apron at your cafe. Attached was the shot. Elias bent over the sink, smiling faintly. Chalkboard menu behind him. Caption: When CEOs switch careers, even dishwashing needs strategy. Mira bit her lip, torn between laughter and worry. The press might come tomorrow. Let them. Elias shrugged. I'll just say tonight I learned 3 things. Wipe tables in circles. Rinse cups by sound. And a smile can unlock a heavy day. His eyes caught hers on the word smile. Mira looked away quickly, pretending to count coffee beans. As the night thinned, the students left with cheerful goodbyes. Good luck passing your lat art exam, Mr. CEO. The book club waved warmly to the new staff. Near midnight, the rain still tapped steadily outside like a lullaby. Mira set a mug of hot cocoa in front of Elias. First, shift, reward. Not the last cup of coffee, he teased. You've already had 2. Quota filled. Try this. It helps you sleep. If you can sleep. Elias cupped the mug, heat seeping into his skin. Strange. I spend my days drowning in voices, yet my mind stays loud. But here, it's only water running, spoons tapping, and I feel quiet, because here, no one expects you to be strong all the time, Mira said softly, almost without realizing. Here, you can lean on the counter when you're tired. Drop a cup. We pick it up. If you can laugh, then laugh. He stared at her for a long moment, as though engraving her words. Mira, I think I've forgotten what ordinary feels like. Then practice it every night. She clinked her mug against his. No business plan required. Elias chuckled low and warm. They sat together on the bench by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. The street lamps glowed like honey. Mira untied his cat apron, carefully folded it, and looked up. You did well tonight, except for 1 cup sacrificed for art. I'll build a memorial for it, he said gravely, dedicated to 1 ordinary day. And to the tadpole heart, she laughed. When closing time came, Elias flipped the close sign himself. Mira crossed her arms. That makes it official. You're hired. Salary paid in cookies. I'll take it. He lingered at the doorway, umbrella in hand, then hesitated. Tomorrow night, do you still need a temp worker? Mira tilted her head, pretending to weigh it. Yes, but the conditions are tough. What are they? You must wear the cat apron and arrive 10 minutes before midnight. Elias laughed, nodding as if signing a contract. See you tomorrow, boss. He stepped out into the rain, umbrella shielding him. From the doorway, Mira watched his figure fade into the downpour, a warm shadow in the wet night. She closed the door, her heart beating strangely fast, like when milk froth's just right, foam smooth and perfect. Somewhere out there, people were still sharing the photo. Billionaire CEO washing cups in a small cafe. But inside this warm little shop, only the echoes of laughter remained, the scent of cocoa, and a simple promise of tomorrow. Mira finished tidying, dimming the lights one by one, until only a soft golden glow remained on the glass. She picked up the cat apron, smiling to no one in particular. It turned out that ordinary could be the most precious luxury, and tonight, she had found it right here among clean dishes, steady rain, and 2 people learning how to laugh together. she reminded herself. Don't overthink. Tomorrow, there's still coffee to brew, smiles to earn. Yet her heart insisted on adding a new measure, the number of times the night owl customer had made her laugh in a single night. At closing, Mira hung the aprons back up, paused, then set the cat apron aside in the drawer near the counter, as though saving it for someone. The key turned with a soft click. Outside, the rain was easing. Inside, the cocoa still lingered warm, and somewhere between them hung the promise. See you tomorrow. As gentle as steamed milk at its sweetest point, the cafe was quiet that night. Outside, the streets had sunk into silence, only a few street lamps casting their glow onto the glistening pavement. Mira sat on a high stool behind the counter, chin resting on her hand, eyes half closed. It had been a long day, but her heart felt strange, calm yet unsettled. The soft jingle of the doorbell rang. She didn't even have to look up. The night owl customer's back again, she murmured playfully. Elias stepped inside, this time without his usual rushed air. He wore a simple white shirt, his jacket slung over one arm, hair slightly tousled as if he'd hurried there. He looked more approachable than ever. I told you, don't call me the night owl customer, he said with a smile, settling into his familiar chair. But I admit, it sounds kind of nice. Then accept it. It's your permanent nickname. Mira stood to start the machine, but Elias spoke up. Tonight, don't bother with anything fancy. I just want to sit here for a while. His voice dropped lower, a tone different from his usual one. Mira blinked, then chose to brew a simple black coffee and set it before him. They sat in silence for several minutes, only the clink of a spoon against porcelain and the steady ticking of the clock filling the air. It felt like the night was urging honesty. Mira drew a breath. She had wanted to say this many times, but always stopped herself. Tonight felt right. Elias, she began, her eyes on the glass of water in her hand. This cafe isn't just a job. It's my mother's legacy. He looked up, his gaze darkening with focus. She passed away from heart disease 4 years ago. Mira pressed her lips together, her voice softening. She always said she wanted to open a little cafe with windows facing the street. Mornings for pastries, evenings for warmth. She never got the chance, so I decided to do it for her. Elias said nothing, didn't interrupt. His eyes simply rested on her, gentle, absorbing every word. Honestly, opening this place was hard. I took loans and worked side jobs. There were times I wanted to give up. But every time I was tired, I remembered her. I didn't want her dream to stay just words. Mira lifted her head, giving him a faint smile. So, don't underestimate this little cafe. It's my whole heart. A pause. Then Elias set his cup down and said slowly, You're incredible. What? Strong in a way. Mira chuckled, about to brush it off, when he continued, My father died when I just started college. The entire company fell on my shoulders. I had no time to cry or dream. There was only one path. Be strong, never weak. People call me cold, ruthless. But really, it's just a shell. She tilted her head slightly. For the first time, Mira didn't see Elias as a distant CEO. Behind the suit and the numbers was a son who had lost his anchor. Do you ever feel lonely? She asked softly. Elias gave a quiet laugh, though his eyes were sad. Loneliness has been my closest friend for years. I just never admitted it. And in that silence, it was as though each had found a reflection of themselves. That night, their conversation was no longer about silly jokes or latte mishaps. They spoke of childhood. Mira of her mother singing jazz, like lullabies on rainy evenings. Elias of his father taking him to the docks, teaching him how to read the wind. They spoke of fears. Mira's fear that one day the cafe would close, that she wouldn't be strong enough to hold on to her dream. Elias's fear of failure, of being nothing more than his father's shadow, crushed by pressure, without finding himself. And they laughed when they discovered they both despised raisins in pastries. Raisins are betrayal, Mira declared, eyes sparkling. You think you're biting into chocolate, and instead, sour disappointment. Exactly, Elias laughed, a real laugh. I rarely find allies like you. By the time the clock struck 1, Mira realized how quickly the hours had passed. Hey, you need to get some rest. Don't you have meetings tomorrow? Elias glanced around the cafe, as if reluctant to leave. This place is easier to breathe in than the office, but all right. He stood, picked up his jacket, then paused at the door. Thank you for telling me your secret. I'll keep it. Mira nodded, a small smile on her lips. And I'll keep yours. The cold CEO is really just a son who misses his father. Elias froze briefly, then gave a faint smile. Sounds like a tabloid headline, but true. He stepped out, his tall frame fading into the night. Left alone, Mira sat at the table he had just left. She touched the cup, still faintly warm, her heart tangled. For the first time in years, she had spoken aloud her hidden grief, and strangely, it no longer felt heavy. Perhaps when someone truly listens, a wound loses its sharp edge. It becomes a story, something to share, something that heals. In the quiet, with rain pattering softly outside, Mira smiled because now she was no longer the only one carrying the secret. That evening, the cafe was quiet. Mira had just closed her ledger when the door swung open. Elias entered, not with his usual relaxed air. He wore a dark suit, his tie neatly knotted. His steps slightly rushed, and in his eyes flickered a trace of unease. Hey, you're early tonight. Mira looked up, half teasing, half curious. Elias took his usual seat, tapping his fingers lightly against the table. After a brief hesitation, he cleared his throat. I need to ask you for something. A favor? Mira folded her arms, narrowing her eyes. Don't tell me you want me to train you to open your own cafe. I'm not ready to compete with a CEO. He chuckled softly, then shook his head. No, there's a company event tomorrow evening. I have to attend, but if I go alone, the press will swarm me with questions about my private life. I want you to come with me. Just pretend to be my date. Mira froze, her mouth slightly open, but no words coming out. Me? Go with you? She repeated, her voice higher than usual. Yes, Elias nodded. His tone sincere. You don't have to do anything special. Just be yourself. Mira glanced down at the tablecloth, her heart pounding, mind racing through scenarios. What dress to wear, how out of place she'd look among the elite, whether she'd get lost in that world. I don't belong at those events, she whispered. I'm just a small cafe owner. Elias leaned forward, his gaze warm. That's exactly why I'm asking you. I'm so used to fake smiles, designer gowns, empty conversations. I just want someone truly ordinary by my side. His words caught in her chest. Ordinary. No one had ever called her special, yet to him, her very ordinariness was precious. All right. She sighed, her lips curving slightly, but fair warning. I don't know how to walk or pose like those magazine ladies. I'd prefer you didn't, Elias replied, his mouth lifting in a rare smile. The next evening, Mira stood before the mirror in the small upstairs room above the cafe. She wore a simple pale blue dress, loose and graceful, paired with a delicate necklace her mother had left her. Her hair was down, falling in soft, wavy strands. Do I look like I'm walking into the wrong place? She murmured to herself, heart thumping. The doorbell rang. Elias stood outside, still in a suit but sharper tonight, his tie straight, shoes polished. The moment he saw Mira, he stopped short. You look beautiful, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on her. Flustered, Mira quickly grabbed her small bag. Stop. You sound like a commercial. Let's go before we're late. The event was held at the city's most luxurious hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. The ballroom glimmered with gowns and tuxedos, and jazz music floated in the background. As soon as Elias and Mira walked in, camera flashes erupted. Reporters and guests turned their heads. Oh no, Mira whispered instinctively, edging closer to Elias. He leaned toward her reassuringly. Relax. Pretend they're just cafe customers. Just more of them. More? She hissed. Feels like an entire stadium. Elias smiled faintly, placing a gentle hand on her back as he guided her through the crowd. Whispers rose around them. Who's that with Elias Sterling? Doesn't look like the usual businesswomen or models. So natural. Surely not. Mira caught fragments, her face heating. But then she remembered Elias's words. Just be yourself. So she took a breath and forced her smile to stay easy. Throughout the night, Elias had to greet many people, yet he never left her on the sidelines. Each time, he introduced her simply, "This is Mira, my friend." Nothing more. No elaborate explanation. That simplicity eased her nerves. When one chairwoman asked, "And what do you do, Mira?" she answered honestly, "I run a small cafe, just a small one, but I like to think every cup of coffee has its own story." The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled. "That sounds far more delightful than our dry reports." The table laughed. Elias, seated beside her, looked at her with quiet pride. He had never seen anyone soften a room so naturally with a few sincere words. The most unforgettable moment came when a reporter approached, camera in hand, and asked bluntly, "Mr. Sterling, is this your new girlfriend?" The room fell still. Mira froze, wide-eyed, unsure whether to laugh or deny it. Elias remained calm, his hand still lightly at her back, and replied with a mix of humor and truth. "She's the only person who's ever dared make me wear a cat apron and wash dishes. Do you know anyone more extraordinary?" The ballroom erupted in laughter. Even the reporter faltered, unsure how to spin it. Mira wanted to sink through the floor, but when she glanced at Elias, his mischievous smile paired with a gentle gaze, she couldn't help laughing, too. And in that flash of the cameras, the image was captured. The cold CEO, Elias Sterling, laughing brightly beside a simple girl. At the end of the night, as they left the hotel, Mira exhaled, like someone who had just finished a marathon. "I am definitely going to be in the papers tomorrow," she muttered. "No doubt," Elias replied lightly. "But for me, tonight was worth more than any headline." Mira turned, about to say something, but his gaze stopped her. It wasn't the polite look he gave in meetings. It was deep, genuine. Her heart hammered. She quickly looked away, hiding it with a grin. "All right, night owl customer. But next time, give me a warning so I can prepare." Elias chuckled softly, opening the car door for her. "Promise. But who knows? Maybe the unplanned dates become the best memories." Mira stepped inside, her heart swirling. She didn't fully grasp what he meant, but one thing was certain. From this night on, their midnight coffees would never be the same. A few days after the hotel gala, the city's leading financial paper published a photo of Elias standing beside Mira. The bold headline read, "CEO Sterling appears with mysterious companion at event. Has he found a new flame?" The next morning as the cafe opened, a neighbor rushed over and shoved the paper into Mira's hands, her eyes sparkling. "You're famous now. Who else but Mira from the cafe?" Mira looked at the photo. Elias in his sleek black suit. Beside her in her pale blue dress, he was smiling, eyes fixed as though only on her. It was a beautiful picture. But her heart sank. The headline stirred an old fear. That night, when Elias arrived, Mira had the coffee ready, but her usual teasing tone was gone. He noticed immediately, sat across from her, and tilted his head. "What's this? Not calling me the night owl customer tonight?" "Tonight? I don't feel like joking," she replied softly. Elias frowned. "Because of those articles?" She stayed silent for a moment, then nodded. "I know the media exaggerates everything, but—" She drew in a breath. "I once saw what happened to a friend. She fell in love with a wealthy man. At first, it was beautiful, like a scene from a movie. But slowly, the gap showed. She faced pressure from the public and her family. In the end, it broke her. She fell apart, lost all faith in love." Her voice trembled. "I don't want to end up the same. I don't want to be hurt just because I stepped into a world that doesn't belong to me." Elias sat still, his fingers knotted together. He had never considered it that way. To him, the gap between the rich and the poor was just a surface, but to Mira, it was a wound that cut deep. "Mira," he said, his voice low, "I don't want you to feel that way." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I'm just ordinary. You live in another world where people are judged by their bank accounts and social status. All I have is a small cafe, a tiny dream." Elias's eyes flickered with uncertainty. All his life, he had been the one to hold power, the one people tried to persuade. He could close multi-million-dollar deals with numbers and clauses, but with Mira, his words felt clumsy. "I don't know how to convince you," he admitted, "but when I'm with you, I can be myself, not a CEO, not someone hiding behind a mask, just Elias, the man who wants to drink the last cup of coffee with you." Mira met his gaze. His honesty shook her heart, yet fear still hovered. "I believe you're a good man, but I'm not sure I can handle the pressure." That night, they sat across from each other in silence. Broken only by the ticking clock, Elias sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes never leaving Mira's face. She stared at the wooden tabletop, twirling her spoon as though spinning her worries round and round. Elias wanted to say, "Give me a chance," but the words stayed locked. He had never begged for affection, never had to prove his sincerity. For the first time, Elias Sterling, the undefeated CEO, was helpless before a heart. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Elias invited Mira to dinner at an Italian restaurant. He wanted to show her that his world wasn't as frightening as she feared. Mira hesitated, but eventually agreed. The restaurant glowed with candlelight, violins playing softly. Staff greeted Mr. Sterling with particular deference. Mira sat down, feeling like she had wandered onto a dazzling stage where she didn't belong. During the meal, Elias tried to lighten the mood by sharing a few light stories from work, but the distance still pressed on her. Guests at nearby tables kept glancing over, some eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Who is that girl? She doesn't look high society at all," even whispered. The words rang clear in Mira's ears. Her hands trembled slightly around the silverware. Elias noticed, leaned closer, and murmured, "They don't matter. It's just us." She forced a smile, but her chest tightened. His words were warm, yet reality cut sharply. She was sitting in his world, where every gaze felt like a blade. On the ride back, Mira was silent the whole way. At the cafe door, she finally turned to him. "Say, I don't belong." Elias's grip tightened on the wheel. He turned toward her, his eyes full of confusion and urgency. "No, Mira, don't let a few stars define us. It's not just a few stairs." Her voice wavered. "It's your whole world, and it's too far from mine." Silence stretched. Then Mira opened the door and stepped out, leaving Elias gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. That night, Mira sat alone in the cafe, the lights dim, only a single candle flickering. She looked around at the warm space, red brick walls, an old bookshelf, the lingering scent of coffee. This was where she belonged, yet her heart was restless, tethered to a man from another world. She remembered Elias's smile, the way he fumbled in a cat apron, the quiet look in his eyes when he spoke of his father. He truly wasn't like the wealthy men she had imagined, but fear whispered, "It will break, just like it did for your friend. Don't let your heart be crushed." Mira wrapped her arms around herself, eyes stinging. On the other side of the city, Elias sat in his high-rise office, the city lights sprawling beneath him. In his hands was a photo taken at the cafe, Mira handing him cocoa with her bright smile. He held it, sighing softly. All his life, he had dealt with figures, terms, and strategies, but now, faced with one ordinary woman, he didn't know how to hold on. "Mira," he murmured, "I've never had to persuade anyone, but this time, I'll learn." His eyes hardened with resolve, as though making a silent vow. That night, neither of them slept. One feared the past repeating, the other was lost in unfamiliar feelings. Between them stretched a gap neither yet knew how to bridge. But one thing was certain, neither wanted to let go, because in each of their hearts there was already a corner reserved for that last cup of coffee, the cup that had linked two worlds never meant to meet. That night, the rain fell in a steady drizzle. The cafe had emptied early. Mira cleaned in silence, the sound of her cloth against the tables blending with soft jazz from the old speaker. The aroma of roasted coffee lingered in the air, warm and comforting, yet her heart was tangled. When the clock struck midnight, the familiar knocking came. Knock, knock, knock. Mira froze. She had promised herself she'd close early tonight, avoid Elias, and give her heart time to cool down. But her feet seemed to have a will of their own, carrying her to the door. He stood there, his shirt damp with rain, his hair tousled, his eyes searching. When he saw her, his lips curved faintly, not the usual light smile, but one tinged with weariness and waiting. "Come in," Mira sighed, opening the door. Just one last cup. Elias stepped inside and took his usual seat. Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain outside. Mira prepared the coffee, trying to keep everything normal, though her hands trembled slightly. When she set the cup before him, Elias didn't drink. He leaned his elbow on the table, eyes fixed on hers. "Mira, I need to confess something." Her eyes flickered, heart pounding. "Confess what?" "I don't come here for the coffee," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "In truth, I don't even like strong coffee that much." Mira's eyes widened in shock. "What? Then all this time?" He nodded slightly. "I came for the conversations with you, for your smile, for the chance to be myself here." The air grew heavy with sweetness, tightening Mira's chest. She looked away, fumbling for a distraction. "You really know how to throw people off. Careful, or I'll start charging extra for sweet talk." Elias didn't laugh. He reached out, lightly brushing his fingers against the hand she had resting on the wooden table. The touch was gentle, yet enough to startle her, warmth spreading from her fingertips straight into her heart. "If this is the last cup of coffee," he whispered, eyes never leaving hers, "I wanted to come with something honest." Mira looked up. His gaze was deep, earnest, and tender at once, as if the world outside no longer existed, only the two of them in this little cafe. "Elias," she breathed, her voice catching. He gave her hand a soft squeeze, not forcing, just affirming. "I can't promise my world is easy, but I promise in that world there will always be a place for you." Mira stayed silent. Inside her, fear and longing twisted together, stealing her breath. She wanted to believe him, yet the past still whispered of old wounds. "You don't know what you're saying," she said lightly with a forced smile. "Bitter coffee can cause illusions." Elias studied her for a long moment, then gave a wistful smile. "Maybe, but for me, the bitterest cup has been the sweetest because it came with you." In that instant, the little cafe seemed to freeze. Outside, the rain drummed steadily. Inside, their hands stayed joined, holding on to a rare warmth. Mira knew then that her heart had truly stirred, and she also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for now, it was enough just to sit together, listen to the rain, sip coffee, and hold on to one honest promise. That morning, just as Mira finished tidying the tables outside, her phone buzzed nonstop. She glanced at the screen and froze at the headline spreading everywhere. CEO Elias Sterling is rumored to be married to a young businesswoman, the heiress of a major real estate empire. The pair is said to be a perfect match, promising a powerful union. Attached was a photo of Elias standing beside an elegant woman at a conference. Both were smiling, looking every bit the picture-perfect couple. Mira stood motionless, her heart plummeting. The article had gone viral across social media, and even the cafe's regulars were whispering as they passed. "Did you see that CEO's about to get married? That girl he was with the other night must have just been a friend." Each word sliced into her like a knife. She remembered Elias's touch on her hand, his words, "If this is the last cup of coffee." Was it all a game? Just a pastime for a cold CEO? Her fists clenched, her lips trembling. The fragile trust she had just begun to nurture shattered into mist. That evening, at the usual hour, Elias showed up. He tapped on the glass, ready with a smile. But inside, Mira had switched off the lights and pulled the curtains. He frowned, knocked again. "Mira, it's me." No reply, only the patter of rain starting to drum on the awning. Elias pulled out his phone, called, but the ringtone echoed faintly from inside, unanswered. A surge of unease hit him. He knocked harder, raising his voice. "Mira, please open the door. I need to explain." Behind the curtain in the darkened cafe, Mira sat curled on the floor, clutching a pillow. Tears streamed down her face, though she bit her lip to keep from sobbing aloud. She didn't want to hear, didn't want to be persuaded, only to break all over again. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Elias's suit clung to his shoulders, but he didn't move. He kept knocking, his voice steady. "Mira, please listen to me. It's just a false rumor. I never wanted anyone but you." The wind lashed, rain pounded, but his words carried through the glass. Passersby slowed, astonished to see a billionaire CEO drenched to the bone, standing before a small cafe, knocking with the desperation of a wanderer begging for shelter. Inside, Mira pressed her forehead to her knees, her heart torn in two. A part of her longed to throw open the door, to fall into his arms, but another part screamed, Don't let yourself be fooled again." She choked back a sob, clutching the necklace her mother had left her, then whispered as if to steady herself, "This will be the last cup of coffee." The real last one. Outside, Elias remained, rain streaming down his face, his jaw tight, eyes unwavering. No storm could drive him away. He held on to the fragile hope that the little door might still open. All that night, they stayed one inside, one outside, both swallowed by darkness and rain. Only a thin wooden door separated them, yet their hearts felt worlds apart, divided by an unspoken misunderstanding. And neither of them knew this moment was the turning point, the place where love would have to face its first true trial. The rumor of an arranged marriage between Elias Sterling and the Winston heiress spread like wildfire. In the press, photos of him standing beside the woman were blown up into the image of a power couple. Sterling Enterprises stock wavered. Headlines blared across every outlet. In the little cafe, Mira sat frozen before her phone screen. Every line of text cut into her heart like a blade. She thought of the nights Elias came by, of his gentle words, of the times he clumsily wiped tables, of the promise that had made her heart tremble. If this is the last cup of coffee, I wanted to come with something honest. Was it all just a game? 2 days later, Sterling Enterprises called an emergency press conference. The hall blazed with lights, jam-packed with reporters. Every eye waiting for confirmation. Elias stepped onto the stage, tall, composed, his suit flawless, yet in his eyes burned exhaustion mixed with resolve. "Ladies and gentlemen," his deep voice carried across the room, "the rumors of a marriage between myself and Miss Winston are entirely false." A wave of murmurs swept the room. A reporter raised his hand. "Then what about the photos of you two together?" Elias gave a slight nod. "Those were taken at a business conference. A rival company deliberately fabricated the story to damage our reputation. Here is the evidence." The giant screen behind him lit up with leaked emails exposing the scheme. Reporters erupted in chatter, cameras flashing wildly. But Elias wasn't finished. He drew in a steady breath and spoke slowly. "I want to make one more thing clear. The person I want by my side is no one else but the girl who serves me coffee at midnight." The room exploded. Hundreds of flashes went off. Reporters shouted over one another. "Who is she? How long have you two known each other? Mr. Sterling, are you officially going public with your relationship?" Elias didn't flinch. He smiled faintly, eyes shining. "I've never felt as much peace as I do in that small cafe. She isn't a businesswoman, nor a model. She's just an ordinary girl, but she's the one who reminds me that I'm human, too, and I have no reason to hide that." Back in the cafe, Mira stared at her laptop screen. Every word he spoke struck straight into her heart. Tears welled up and spilled before she realized it. She was angry, and moved all at once, angry that he hadn't warned her, leaving her to suffer days of doubt. Moved because he had stood before the entire world and spoken the truth. Customers whispered, pointing. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages. "Mira, is it true? Are you the girl?" Her hands trembled as she held her cup, whispering under her breath. "Elias, you're absolutely crazy." But deep down, her heart quivered. That night, right on cue, came the knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Behind the counter, Mira froze. She didn't move to open the door. Her heart raced, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. Outside, Elias's voice carried in. Low, steady, pleading. "Mira, I'll wait, even if you don't want to see me. But please don't doubt the truth of my heart." She bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. Only a single door separated them. Yet, she still didn't have the courage to open it. And that night ended with a lingering question heavy in Mira's chest. Could she truly trust him completely? The next night, the streets were quiet. The cafe was nearly closed. Mira was stacking chairs, her heart full of hesitation. She knew the knocking would come, and when it did knock, her heart trembled. She didn't need to look to know who stood outside. This time, Mira drew a deep breath, then turned the key. The door opened, and there was Elias, tall in the golden light, shirt slightly rumpled, his face tired, but his eyes ablaze. He spoke first, a faint smile curving his lips. "One last cup of coffee." Mira's throat tightened. Without a word, she turned to brew the coffee. When she set the cup in front of him, she sat down across from him, her heart pounding. Elias held her gaze for a long time. Then his voice came, low and husky. "I have to tell you the truth. For years, I've lived in boardrooms, at glittering parties, under the flash of cameras. Everyone thinks I'm unshakable, but inside, I've been lonely." His hands clenched together, his eyes earnest. "Meeting you reminded me that I need a place to belong. You make me laugh. You make me breathe easier. And I'm afraid that because of the distance between us, because of prejudice, one day I'll lose you, lose the most precious thing in my life." Tears spilled down Mira's cheeks. Her voice trembled as she replied, "Elias, I'm afraid, too. I'm afraid I'm not enough. Afraid that in your world, I'll only ever be a small shadow." He reached out, clasping her hand, warm, firm, steady. "I can't promise to erase every hardship, but I promise I will never let go of your hand." Mira broke into sobs. Elias stood, moved around the table, and pulled her into his arms. His embrace was wide and strong, wrapping around the fragility she had hidden for so long. "Cry," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "I'm here now." Mira rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady, heartfelt rhythm of his heartbeat. His familiar scent, mixed with the bitterness of coffee, filled her with a warmth so overwhelming that it hurt. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean on someone, to lower the defenses around her heart, and for the first time, Elias felt the warmth of the family he had always longed for. They held each other for a long time, as if letting go meant losing each other forever in the vast world outside. The night remained deep, but inside the little cafe, golden light bathed two figures, illuminating a new beginning. Months had passed since that stormy night, when Elias stood at the cafe door and laid bare his hidden fears. From that moment on, Mira's life had changed. Each day, she still opened the cafe, wiped tables, brewed coffee, but now, it was more than her mother's dream. It had become a place holding every shared moment between her and Elias. Elias was still the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, consumed by board meetings, multi-million-dollar deals, and lengthy business trips, but whenever the city lights came on, he appeared in the familiar glass doorway, tied on the cat apron, and worked beside Mira like an ordinary cafe employee. Regular customers no longer found it strange. In fact, they delighted in it. To them, this cafe sold not just drinks, but smiles and a love story. "Good evening, night shift boss." Mira would tease when he walked in. "Reporting in, day shift boss. Tonight, I'm 10 minutes early," Elias would reply, half serious, as though presenting to a board. Then both would laugh and fall into the rhythm of small but meaningful tasks. He wiped tables, she brewed drinks, he carried trays, she greeted guests. Some nights, exhausted, they leaned against the counter, sharing a cookie and a cup of cocoa. No words were needed. The peace itself was enough to make the noisy world outside seem far away. That winter, the cafe grew busier than ever. People came to escape the cold, to breathe in the rich scent of roasted coffee, to listen to soft jazz in the cozy warmth. After a long day of negotiations, Elias slipped on the cat apron again, pouring water and taking orders with surprising cheer. "You pour tea as seriously as if you're signing a billion-dollar contract." Mira teased in his ear. "Because if I spill, you'll scold me," Elias deadpanned. Then winked. Laughter rippled through the cafe. Their love, unassuming and unpretentious, had become an atmosphere everyone could feel. One weekend evening, snowflakes drifted outside, and the cafe glowed brighter than usual. Mira was busy with customers while Elias fussed behind the counter. But tonight, he was different, his hands trembling, checking his watch again and again, fiddling nervously with the milk steamer. "What are you doing?" Mira tilted her head. Something special," Elias said with a weak smile. She shook her head, certain he was trying out another doomed latte art experiment, and went back to serving. Around 9, the cafe quieted. The group of students left. The old man folded his paper. The young couple lulled their baby to sleep. The jazz track faded into a soft interlude. Only the faint clink of spoons remained. Elias drew in a deep breath and called softly, "Mira, come here." She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. In front of her, he carefully tilted the milk pitcher over a steaming cappuccino. White foam spread across the brown surface in slow strokes. Mira braced for another lopsided heart, but this time, the foam formed letters. She held her breath. On the cappuccino, the words appeared clearly. "Marry me." Mira's heart stopped. The entire cafe went silent. Customers turned, holding their breath. Elias looked up, eyes bright. He set the cup before her and said softly, "Mira, I've had everything, but never a place to truly call home. You gave me that place with every midnight cup. I want to share that last cup with you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" No one spoke, but the cafe seemed to hold its breath. Mira cupped the coffee with both hands. Her eyes wet, memories flooded back. Her mother's dream of the cafe, the rainy night he stood outside the door, his clumsy dishwashing, the tadpole-shaped latte heart, his midnight confession, all leading here. Tears fell, but her lips curved into a smile. She looked straight into his eyes. Yes, just 2 words, and the cafe erupted. The old man clapped vigorously. The students shouted, "She said yes! She said yes!" The young couple beamed, their baby babbling along. Applause and cheers filled the room. Elias couldn't hold back. He rushed around the counter and pulled Mira into his arms. Customers rose to their feet, snapping photos, recording videos, all smiling at the sweetness before them. Moments later, Elias pulled a small box from his coat. He knelt on one knee in the middle of the cafe and opened it to reveal a silver ring. Simple, elegant, not flashy. "This is the only contract in my life I don't want to negotiate," Elias said, voice trembling yet firm. "Be my wife, Mira." Mira laughed through her tears, holding out her hand. "As long as you don't break too many cups in the cafe." Laughter rang out, and more applause. Elias slid the ring onto her finger, then drew her up into his arms. They embraced amid clapping and warm golden light. That night, the little cafe turned into a small celebration. Mira cut the cake to share, and Elias poured hot cocoa, raising it like champagne. Everyone laughed. Everyone offered blessings. When the cafe was nearly empty again, Mira stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet street. Snowflakes fell under the lamplight. She squeezed Elias's hand, whispering, "You know, love doesn't need castles or extravagance. Just one last honest cup of coffee is enough." Elias wrapped his arm around her shoulders, murmuring, "And I promise, for the rest of my life, you'll never drink that last cup alone." They leaned together, watching the snowfall. On the table, the cappuccino with "Marry Me" had gone cold, but the fire in their hearts had just begun to burn. Love doesn't need palaces or luxury, just a small cafe, 1 cup of coffee, and someone to sit beside you until the very last sip. And in that cafe, love had found its true home.